Happy Thursday, friends. Welcome to another edition of the Mystery Wine Blind Tasting here at Field and Main. I'm Neal Wavra, your host. Cheers. This is intoxicating, a lovely nose, and a beautiful white, I would say sunshiny white to go with a beautiful sunshiny day that we have right out this window here and just outside. Who's joining us tonight? Curious to see who's going to be playing along. It's got a similarity, or a familiarity, I should say, in the nose of a couple different varietals. And so as we dive into this, it's going to be fun to see where this wine takes us. And there's a couple of indicators already, as I've said. So, Kathy, good evening. Fabulous nose. I agree. Yes. Just as I opened it a moment ago, it kind of burst out of the glass. Actually, as I was pouring it into the glass, it sort of, the aroma already was filling the room. So, a beautiful wine. The Burses are here tonight. Hi, Jan. Hi, Chris. Yes, everybody's noting the nose. Floral, cool, and fruited. It's fabulous. It's expressive. Yeah, that little white flower element for me is coming out now. Thank you for the suggestion, Chris and Courtney. Yeah, it's lovely, intoxicating, kind of like this time of year. I mean, it's just one of the most exciting times of year from the production and the produce standpoint, as things just keep coming and bursting forth, and we get notes from farmers and saying we've got a flush of this and we have this in production, we're transitioning from that into this. And so the warmer weather we had last week pushed a couple of things forward, and so we're making transitions here from the last of the strawberries and into fennel and things of that sort. Now blackberries and blueberries coming and playing around with some squashes that are first coming out. And so a few tomatoes we heard tell of, and we're kind of looking forward to and anticipating tomatoes, but we're just kind of playing with that sort of interim phase of sort of squashes as they're coming on strong, and cucumbers are just starting to come out. So it's going to be gazpacho season shortly, and so it's a lot of exciting kind of things happening in the way of the wines that are excuse me, of the foods that are coming in and the wines to go with this time of year. This is a pretty good example of what, just based on the nose, of what you'd want to drink at this time of year. That's fantastic. Melissa and Jeremy are joining us from Cape May. They were in this past week and bought the wine to take with them. So we're traveling again, which is awesome. So many of you take us places, which is great. Kestenbaums are here and ready for a white, as am I. Kathy's saying a big sniff, and she got tons of descriptors. Orange blossom, honeycomb, lanolin, lemongrass, fig, which is neat to have fig kind of accompanying all those profiles. Yeah, I mean, so right off the bat, right as we're starting to kind of think about the varietals that this could be based on the aroma alone, we're thinking about things that have an aromatic profile, things like muscat, things like viognier. They have a lot of kind of expressive aromatics. You could have something like Gewürztraminer, Traminette, Traminer. Those are aromatic varietals that you should consider. So right off the bat, we should be considering those types of wines and add to it. I mean, the first sniff sort of smelled kind of Chardonnay-like. There were Chardonnay characteristics in there, and I don't think you'd get as much of that orange blossom, but there were some notes, some stone, kind of some tree fruit notes, excuse me, and the apple element, kind of a pear quality, more appley, I think, at this point, but ripe. And then there is the kind of host of other aromatic smells to it that are just lovely and might take you away from Chardonnay, but adding to it, like it's creating a profile. I wouldn't say, for example, right off the bat, you're looking to identify as much as you can, but also to rule out as much as you can. And this doesn't smell like Sauvignon Blanc, for example, so we can take Sauvignon Blanc out of the mix. It's not a neutral kind of profile, so it's probably not Pinot Grigio. It's probably not Pinot Blanc as we tasted recently, which was just more about that lemony, not quite as much of the aromatics that we're getting here. White peach, fantastic descriptor from Chris. So it's not sort of more the neutral side of things. I don't know that we would want to talk about Albarino, for example. Some more of that spice is coming on now. And Robert, hi. Kathy and Shannon are here. That's great. So nice to have you guys in too. They joined us for dinner. Yeah. This is nice. All right. We jumped ahead to the nose and kind of walked right past the, or sniffed right past the actual appearance of the wine because it was so prominent, and that's a good thing. You can latch on to what jumps first, and what was leading in this wine for sure is the aroma. So what about the appearance? Do we know anything about the wine because of it? It's forming some tiers, right? It's forming some legs, pretty substantial ones. They're working their way, forming distinctly and sheeting, not sheeting, but actually dropping in tiers down. Tim and Elizabeth, hello, welcome this evening. We're glad to have you with us too with this beautiful, it's white. Oh yeah, much more. That white peach skin now. So textured, it's got a little bit of weight, right? It has either a little bit of alcohol, maybe a little bit of residual sugar. I'm not picking up a whole bunch of sweetness. So with those descriptors, we're talking about something that could be a little bit of a warmer climate, maybe. Some riper aromatics, but we're getting, so like if it was Muscat, for example, kind of coming from the southern part of France, perhaps, or maybe Spain. We're talking about Viognier. Maybe we'd be talking about Virginia Viognier here, perhaps. It has that sort of, that honeysuckle, that honey element, some of that orange blossom. I don't know, and the peach quality. So we might be kind of venturing down that path. Kathy, oh, that's great news to hear that you're coming in with Rich. That'd be awesome. We look forward to seeing you guys on Sunday. It's always wonderful when you folks come in. Jan, hello, welcome, good evening. All right, so we know aromatically it's got some interesting things going on, and kind of a lot of things going on. And it's got some texture, it's got some warmth. It has some color too, doesn't it? What would you call this color, guys? This is a little bit deeper. It's a little bit richer. And so that might be an indication of the grape varietal. Maybe it's an indication of a little bit of wood. I'm not smelling a whole bunch of overt wood. Chris has thrown out kind of a Rhone blend, Marsanne and Roussanne, Semillon, coming from maybe for Bordeaux side of things. So yeah, let's consider Semillon. That's a great call. I don't know that we get the same aromatic profile, but it has that textural color kind of component here. Kathy's heading down the same path as Chris, so talking a little bit more about Marsanne Roussanne, maybe Marsanne Roussanne Viognier, so maybe we're talking about a Côte du Rhône blend, and getting that kind of complexity in the nose thanks to a blend, and the coloring because of a variety of grapes there. All right. Let's taste this and see. There's a lot to be told. I think if that textural quality on the glass, the legs profile is just really high alcohol, or if it's residual sugar, and if there's residual sugar, that takes us in a whole different realm. Remember that residual sugar is what you perceive toward the finish of the taste. So as you're swallowing something, there will be a little bit potential sweetness that lingers. There might be a faint hint, a really faint hint, but it's mostly finishes with an acidity, a sourness, doesn't it? The acidity is pretty high. So talk to me about the profile of this wine from a taste standpoint. Where are we at with residual sugar or sweetness? Is it an off-dry style? Is it a dry wine? Where's the acidity at? Is it a lower acidity, a medium acidity, a high acidity? Are you still puckering? Are you still salivating? And if so, does that mean that you have a high acidity? Or is it kind of balanced by the alcohol and by maybe some off dryness? The profile here is a little bit different on the finish as it is kind of from the front, right? The approach has a little bit more roundness and richness, and then it sort of zings you with some of that acidity in the finish. Early votes for Viognier blend. coming from the toppers, which is awesome, and a reassuring vote of confidence for the wine in general with Kathy's Yum. A little sugar, yeah, a little perhaps, with mostly dry wine. So it's the acid here is powerful. That first kind of approach is more voluptuous, and then it sort of zings right in the middle of the tongue, and then explodes back along the underside of the tongue, and just creates this wonderful quality of refreshing acidity. Kathy's saying no RS, a good level of alcohol, medium high acid, cooler climate perhaps, viscous. Yeah, it's got some potential alcohol here. That's kind of accompanying a body weight. So would you put this something like skim milk, 2% or whole? Would you put this as a lighter bodied wine, a medium bodied wine, a more robust wine? Yep, it's not sweet. The more taste you have, I think the first taste I had, some of that relatively higher alcohol in this kind of sat in a way that was sweet-ish, but that's a real trick of wines, especially wines with a little bit more higher alcohol. They can read a touch sweet, especially when you have a flavor profile that complements the idea. I mean, honeysuckle and profiles like the orange blossom and those notes kind of go with a sweet idea, and it doesn't have to be accompanied by a wine that is actually sweet if the sugar's all been fermented dry. But then you get that higher alcohol element, and that higher alcohol can sometimes read a little bit sweet. Tricks our palate into thinking that. Medium body, so a medium plus, almost high acidity, and yeah, 2% to kind of whole milk. So medium plus bodied wine. It's got texture. It sort of it belies that texture in the finish with all the acidity, because you just don't, it doesn't linger and settle the same way. It kind of gets cleansed, almost gets sheeted off like you're running your tongue through a car wash. It just it has this element that makes you want to have another sip, because the lasting impression of the wine was this salivating quality. It's like, I gotta have another sip to get to that front side of this wine again real fast, because it had such a pleasing roundness to it. That's fun. All right, so medium plus to high acid, medium plus body, a little bit of color to it, mostly dry. Aromatically, some white flowers, some white peach, some peach skin, some lemongrass was noted by Kathy, and some honeysuckle and some orange blossom. So very aromatic elements there. And if we're talking about a Viognier blend in particular, we would be talking about the southern part of the Rhone Valley for a blend. We could find 100% Viognier coming from the northern part. But one thing that kind of characterizes Viognier typically is a low acidity, or a baseline acidity that's not quite as zingy as this. So if we're talking about Viognier as a varietal that could present some of these aromatic profiles and some of this character and some of the richness of the wine, I don't know that we would get that same level of acidity without something else in the blend, and that's where perhaps we're talking about a Grenache Blanc, we're talking about Marsanne being added to this. Roussanne could add a little bit of richness to this as well. Chris is adding kiwi and grapefruit, so some tropical notes and some citrus notes. Kathy's leaning more towards Semillon, and we have had some beautiful Semillons. We had one beautiful Semillon right from Tyrol's, from the Hunter Valley in Australia, and that had that ripping acidity, if you remember correctly, and less aromatic profile. Kathy, are you thinking Semillon from, I don't know, Argentina or Chile? Are you thinking Semillon from Bordeaux, blended with Sauvignon Blanc? Kind of a dominant Semillon? Jan's not picking up the grapefruits necessarily, but is picking up some other citrus. Hmm. Hmm. The second pour for this got a little bit of a toasty note for me. Chris, you're thinking this is New World. So where would you place this in the New World, Chris? And are you on the Viognier idea still? So are we talking like Viognier from Virginia? Maybe we're talking Virginia Viognier with a little bit of Petit Montsang, for example, to get some of that citrus note and some of that high acid. That kind of pairing combination has been a nice one here in this place. Central Coast. So Central Coast Viognier, if that's where you're headed. Kathy's responding to the question about where she's taking this in the Semillon context and not Australia. Haven't had South American Semillon, but what about West Coast? So a West Coast Semillon? Interesting. With a little bit of Sauvignon Blanc in it. I mean, the Semillon gives you a little bit of that waxiness, kind of a bit of the richness texturally in the wine, and Sauvignon Blanc would give you some of that acidity. If it was on the riper side, you had said fig, and you maybe pick up a little bit of that. But there's a producer called Wavra, I think its name. It comes from the Russian River, I believe, and they do a Sauvignon Blanc that has sort of that fig leaf, fig element to it. That I don't know whether they produce Semillon though. That's interesting. You know, Jim Law is producing a little bit of Semillon. I haven't had a chance to try a recent vintage. I think I tried a beginning sample taste of some of his first wine produced that he didn't really bottle, but he's got Semillon planted here in Virginia. That would be pretty dang cool if Tony was able to source some Linden Semillon for us to play with. But I don't know that the orange blossom element, the white flower element. There's this Viura. I was trying to think of the Spanish varietal, the Viura grape that comes from sort of the Rueda or places in Spain where you get some of this high acid and some aromatic quality. That we used to carry one called Arcadi that was produced in Rioja with the Viura from there that was made to go with sushi in Japan for a particular sushi restaurant. There's hints of something like that here. I think, did we have that? We might have had that wine blind in this setup before. I cannot recall whether we tasted that one, but it's a lovely wine. What do you think? Where should we go? West Coast Semillon. That's where Kathy's headed. That's where Chris sort of seems like he's headed, Central Coast. Chris, are you in the kind of Viognier camp there? Or are you thinking a different varietal for the Central Coast? Jan, what about you? The Jan and Bobby, what are you thinking? And Haynes, what are you guys thinking? Where is this taking you? Toppers, are you still on the Viognier blend kick? For my own part, I like what we're saying, but I'm not clear on where to take it. I think you could comfortably take this to all those places and make an argument. Elizabeth, yeah, I kind of had ruled out Albarino initially. If you're thinking Albarino, what's making you go there? There was a little bit of that kind of tree fruit element, more apple than anything to begin with. It has the acidity, which is nice, but I don't know about those aromatic qualities that we're picking up first. Chris is saying Grenache Blanc with a blend of other Rhone grapes. Viognier and Semillon blended in. I've never had a Viognier Semillon blend, but that could be interesting. And nothing, as we've proven time and time again, is off the table when it comes to what Tony will pick for us to taste. Vino Verde from Jan or Viognier. Interesting. So Pinot Verde, I think, would give us some of the aromatic elements and probably a little bit lighter bodied wine and potentially a little bit more of a greener cast to the wine itself. The what about for you West Coasters? California Central Coast, kind of, I get that idea. What if we went north to Washington? I'm thinking more about Bordeaux varieties and where Bordeaux varieties are planted, and you might get some of that sort of Semillon planted up in Washington. You can get some Viognier up in Oregon and certainly in the Central Coast area. Robert, you're saying Viognier blend as well. And are you New World too, you guys? Or are you more kind of Rhone Viognier blend? There is a warmth and ripeness to this that could potentially come from France, but it could also come from sort of the West Coast, and I'm not sure. It's staying relatively consistent. Normally at this point in the tasting, I don't know that we see kind of that consistency. Typically we see like a little shift in the wine. It's maintaining its acidity, its textural qualities there. If anything, because I've tasted it a number of times, it's not necessarily as pronounced aromatically, but it is pretty much there. So you guys think Washington State, that's what Kathy said to Rich, Oregon or Washington, Rhone Viognier is where Jan's projector's going. And yeah, you've got 100% the Rhone Rangers themselves in sort of the Central Coast area producing kind of this California kind of culture of Rhone blends. You had Tablas Creek, for example, established by the Perrin family, who makes Chateau Beaucastel, and then you had all these other producers get on board with the idea that they were going to produce some really interesting wines out of Rhone varietals, and so perhaps we're tasting kind of like a Maitland de Tablas or Tablas Creek kind of Viognier blend that comes from the Central Coast of California. And Pam votes French White Bordeaux, which is cool. Thank you for that. Yeah, so Semillon Sauvignon Blanc blend from Bordeaux. I'm not getting a lot of wood, and that could be because there's a Semillon Sauvignon Blanc blend kind of Entre deux Mers or Petit Chateau that's making it without sort of the wood or just in a stainless steel fashion. Cheating in the Chris Shirley canon of ways of doing that too. You wouldn't typically get this bottle from Bordeaux. So it's an indication, it's an unfair indication that I don't know that this would be coming from Bordeaux. They don't have this bottle in Bordeaux. Maybe not true, but they definitely used the high shoulder, the broad shouldered bottle, more slender bottle. That might be interesting. So from that standpoint, I'm not playing the wine as much as I'm playing the bottle, and I would take myself away from Bordeaux. But I like the idea of where you're headed in terms of the varietals that you're considering. So I'm wondering whether somebody would plant in that bottle shape, whether you'd see Semillon. So that would take me kind of back away from Washington in that regard and pull me back toward the Central Coast of California and sort of that Viognier blend. And yeah, I agree 100%. Tablas Creek makes great wines. We haven't carried them a little bit, but have to get back to that. There's enough kind of intrigue, and I think some of that spice is coming on now. That Grenache Blanc element might be coming back into the situation here. It's a pleasing wine. It's kind of where that front palate experience was very separate from the back palate. They're sort of merging, and maybe that's just because it's been open. Maybe that's because I've had a few tastes. Tim's going to stick with the Albarino element. Cool there. And then Elizabeth's kind of coming around to the Central Coast Viognier idea. Everybody likes Tablas Creek. McCarty's hi. I didn't know you were joining us. Welcome, welcome. We're glad you're here. I love it. Those wines are awesome. Story's fantastic. And then they have a whole series of wines Tablas Creek does called Peatland de Tablas, which is the fruit, the vine cuttings, because they created a nursery. They had to create a nursery to bring those varietals in, and they had to have them quarantined, and then they were certified safe from an agricultural standpoint in California. And once they were, then they started to plant their own vineyards. But that nursery also then propagated other people's plantings and other producers, other growers. And those growers have since then, in many cases, sold back fruit to Tablas Creek, and they make a wine called Peatland de Tablas. And they have a white blend, a red blend, and I think they make a rosé too. And they're a great value, and it's all from the progeny material that created then the Tablas Creek vineyards. And so it's different sites throughout the Central Coast that have been planted because they've sourced from their nursery, which is really awesome. So cool wines. And yeah, West Coast not doing too many whites this past year. Okay. So let's for a minute, why West Coast? What is it about this experience that we can help to identify for everybody? Takes us from France, where we're talking about these varietals having a home, bringing us to the West Coast. What is it about this wine that presents in a way that says New World? Chris, you kind of came out of the gate thinking this was New World early. Why? What's distinctive about this? Or what component part? Where in the tasting? Is it in the nose? Was it in the appearance? Was it in the palate? Did New World emerge as a clear sense for you guys? Jan, thanks for zeroing in a little bit on the 18 vintage, and so you're saying this seems a little bit of age, but not a ton. I mean, we're talking about 3 years age, so it's a young wine. The toppers are certainly more comfortable with the New World Viognier blend idea, at least adding that question in a warmer climate, and that's what I'm trying to drive at here is how do we get to that point? And Chris, I'm not sure if you're answering my question there, but stone fruit element, not as earthy. In the nose and the taste for you, thank you for that in response. So in the taste, for me the two. I mean, if I'm going to head to try to identify a specific spot, it's you taste it, and it's right there. So in the mouth, it has body, it has glycerol, it has alcohol derived from sugar. And then there's this bloom in the middle of the experience. So if you clocked it, first third has this richness, and the second third, in the middle there, is this roundness that sort of seems sunshiny, like seems warm. And that's where I think you get more of a New World component to it, because it's presenting in a beautiful way that has Old World characteristic. Kathy's saying price point, the high acidity, so cool climate with elevation. And that's where, yeah, it's kind of got this counterpoint point where you have all this acidity, but also that ripeness. Jan, I thought Riesling too, right off the bat, one of the things to consider, but I always consider, and gosh, now I'm checking myself, because whenever I taste something that's high acidity like this, I think Riesling, and I think Chenin Blanc. And we haven't talked about Chenin Blanc at all. And now referencing back, I don't know that the orange blossom part would match for Chenin Blanc anyway, but Kathy, didn't you say like lanolin at some point too? So there was some of that part. I had apple. We had citrus. So super high acid and texture. We should have considered Chenin Blanc at some point. And it's not, I walked away from Riesling for the reason kind of that Chris is pointing out there. It's not as floral, or Riesling wouldn't be as floral typically. And it would have, it sort of has a different feel in the mouth. When it's dry, it has more of a piercing kind of persistence to it, a serious through line. I mean, the aromatics that you pick up on this, I didn't kind of run through my checklist of the textural quality to kind of get there. So Riesling and Chenin have that quality. Petit Manseng has that quality of high acid and texture, right? We've always talked about this from that context. And we just talked about Viognier, but needing something else to give us that textural quality and the acidity. And the Rhone blend is nice. I like that. I like that call for that reason. I think we could definitely have the acidity. You know, if we're talking about Central Coast, maybe it's got a little claret in it. Maybe it's got a little bit of even peak pool. I mean, what if we're tasting? I just sold a bottle this evening prior to us starting, kind of the EVS Windblown Red Rhone blend from Texas. We're doing a white blend from Texas on the Rhone side of things, but this is the point where I should be kind of coming back to a point and driving home at least a decision process. And I am not peachy, viscous, spice, pear, etc. equals Chenin, is what Kathy's saying. But yeah, not so much the orange blossomy element, that kind of florally note, that white jasmine note. I don't know that. And I thought of Chenin too when I first poured it, but I walked away from the Chenin kind of as I thought about Chardonnay, and then all the other aromatics kind of came out. But if this is Chenin, then we have to talk about South Africa. We need to talk about, obviously, the Loire Valley. We need to talk about, I mean, certainly could have California. What do you think, guys? There's that little bit of residual that we were talking about before in the beginning. This is a dry wine, but it has that warmth and that acid. So we need to achieve that with cool, so as Kathy's pointing out, cool climate, high elevation element. So maybe a warm place that has a higher elevation. And as a result, you get this texture and this acidity and the richness and that persistence. But you got to be in a warmer place. So you'd have to be sort of in the foothills, kind of, or in the higher hills of the Central Coast, producing, not quite like on a valley floor. Chenin Blanc. I mean, Kathy, I'm always happy to put Chenin Blanc on the table. And I was talking to a guest last night, and they were like, "Well, so when you're pairing things, like, what are you always thinking, especially when we're giving you kind of multiple things to work with?" And I'm like, "I'm always thinking about Chenin Blanc and Pinot Noir." Those two varietals kind of just make me happy, and oftentimes have the opportunity to blend with everything in some way or fashion. But West Coast Chenin, Kathy, Washington. Oh. One of my first wine memories, right, is Lake Hole 41 and their Walla Walla, which is one of the best names for a wine ever. Walla Walla is where they're located, but Walla and then Voila, Walla Walla, Chenin Blanc. But it was off dry. Typically, it was produced in a little like off dry sweet kind of version. But yeah, so Washington produces Chenin Blanc, not a lot that I know of. In fact, I don't know that anybody else produces it, but Lake Hole does. Washington Chenin. I remember it being, and I've had it a long time ago, simpler, not quite as rich, but if this is that, for example, and they've taken it to dryness, it gives you more complexity, it gives you more weight by way of the alcohol. I remember it being kind of fun and flirtatious and easy. This has a little bit more going on, especially in the aromatic profile. So, Washington Chenin, interesting. Central Coast Viognier blend. Now that we're all completely jumbled, where should we go? We're gonna put our flag in the sand Hmm. That viscosity, that waxiness, that lanolin, the little bit of apple, the bright high acid. I don't think I can walk away from Chenin. I think I was making Viognier work with something else, like claret or a Grenache, in order to have that acidity. So I'm okay with West Coast Chenin. Um, could though be South African Chenin too. Yep, San Ynez does the more Chenin too. So yeah, I mean, I need to pick some place to be more specific, but could this be a Steen, which is the French, or excuse me, which is the South African idea of a dry Chenin Blanc? And I think the answer to that is yes. You've got the warmth, you've got sea elements, you've got, so let's maybe use that as a, is there any brininess or saltiness here? Is there any kind of sea influence? And we didn't talk about that at all. There's no real minerality to this, so maybe that's a good reason to walk away from more of the South African element. But if you're in more inland there, you can have this. So South Africa, Central Coast, Washington, we're talking about New World, maybe Chenin Blanc. 2019, Washington Chenin for Kathy. Robert's going to go South African Chenin. I don't know if I'm able to kind of parse out enough to give you that variation, but if we're going Washington, it's going to be more inland, and it's going to be Walla Walla or Columbia Valley or something like that, that has a lot of warmth, and the variety itself gets the acidity. I've learned plenty of times, Robert, with all due deference, to not go against Kathy, and especially if I've influenced Kathy in a direction, then I probably should follow suit. So I like how we've gone through this quite a bit. I mean, I really enjoyed, I was thinking Riesling, and then based on the nose, and then I was thinking Chardonnay for a half minute, and then the aromatics kind of took me from that, and then into the Viognier idea and the Rhone blend, sort of Côte du Rhone style white blend, and I love that we went from there to Central Coast, California, and I could be happy with that too. Yeah, I'm just not, the persistence of the aromatics are not there the same way. And that could just be me. So, Chris, you're going to go Paso, Grenache Blanc blend, maybe a little Viognier in there perhaps. So a Rhone style blend there. South African Chenin for Robert and crew. Chenin from Washington for Kathy. All right. Man. I threw Spanish Viura in there too for a minute, and I don't know. It's that acid. It's more acid than I'm willing to give the Rhone blend, so I'm going to go Chenin too. I'll join Kathy up there in Washington for nostalgic purposes, as I went to college in Walla Walla, and one of the first wines I ever tried was that Lake Hole 41 Chenin Blanc from up that way. So let's see. The more you get Albarino, Chris, so you want to switch to Albarino before we go here. Albarino from the Central Coast. Oh, man. Wow. Look at that. Lake Hole 41. This is Chenin Blanc, but from the Yakima Valley. So Old Vine Chenin 2019. So when I had this was in the Walla Walla production and was not from the Yakima Valley, not quite as warm. So this has got more alcohol, I bet. This is, no, it's 13% and it's dry. That's interesting. So some older vine. I don't know if this is where they were sourcing their fruit from before, but they had kind of an off-dry, fun version of Chenin Blanc, and it's not this. I mean, this is Old Vine Chenin versus their Walla Walla kind of fun idea, but that's a neat wine. So School District 41, this is like one of the first 5 or 6 I think, original wineries in the Walla Walla area. For sure the top 10 of the original founding wineries. Founded in 1983. One of Washington State's first artisan family-owned wineries, yes. And it sits just outside of town where I went to college, and it's in an old schoolhouse, which is really neat. And you'd go in and visit and taste, and they'd have the wines written up on an old chalkboard, and some cool wines. But this is a nice textured wine that is tasty, right? It's pretty yummy. It's concentrated, Kathy. It's a good word for it. It has this density to it, and I'm glad you found it delicious, the toppers, Melissa, Jeremy. Yeah, this is a good one, Tony. Good call. And I mean, for 25 bucks, pretty cool that you get to drink Old Vine Chenin. And an example where, Chenin, I should have thought too, like Chalone in California planted Chenin way back in the day, and a lot of Chablis back in the day. The Ernest and Julio Gallo, the general production of just white wine in the country was Chenin based. And that's the case in South Africa too, where a lot of the brandy was made from Chenin Blanc. A lot of Chenin was just used as sort of a workhorse producer, getting ripe, providing alcohol. But boy, it's a really nice, fun wine. And it's a good lesson for us, right? That there can be some aromatic elements, there can be some textural quality. And when we're thinking in any realm of Semillon, Chenin Blanc, Chardonnay, Riesling, Viognier, Grenache, Albarino tossed in there, all of those should be considered. So when we taste an Albarino next time, we should be at least thinking about all these other ones too and starting to parse out what makes them different. And for me, the walk-away point about this wine was that persistent acidity that is particular to Riesling, particular to Chenin Blanc, and kind of Petit Manseng for me. Those two sit in a category sort of above the rest. Acidity can be medium plus and persistent in a lot of other varietals, but with that textural component, that's really where this wine, where Chenin Blanc in particular, kind of shines. And so, yeah, pretty cool. All right, folks. Well, I will see you back here next week as we do one more tasting together for July, and then we'll take 2 weeks off and come back and taste toward the end of July. So we're going to take the second week and the third week off of July, and then revisit on the fourth week there. And that'll provide us with a couple wines to taste then for a couple weeks, and then we're going to take 2 weeks off in August, coinciding with the second and third week there as well. Excuse me. And so the wines, though, if you wish to pick them up in advance, are starting to trickle in, and we'll have kind of all the way through September picked out. We're going to plan on closing for the second and third and probably fourth week of August as we do a little revamp of our space. We're going to kind of do the kitchen floor and relay out some new equipment in the kitchen, and then ideally build a little bit of a vestibule, kind of welcome space on the side entrance there to make that more of our permanent entrance. And so that work will be done, as well as giving the team a little bit of a break. And we'll reopen, which I'm very excited about. We'll reopen kind of on September 1st on our 5th anniversary. So cheers to 5 years, and that week we'll have to do something special and fun to celebrate this tasting, as we'll have been doing this for over a year and a half or so, and that's really exciting. So to all of you who've made this possible and a lot of fun to do, thanks so much. And to Tony and Julie for picking out fun wines, and this one, the super nostalgia trip. I was there from, 1995 to 1998. And when I was there, they were one of the original. So when I was there were 10 wineries when I left in 98, and now there's 100 plus, 200 wineries in the Walla Walla area. That's pretty exciting. So this is one of the OGs, the original producers of great wine in that area. So love to all of you as well. Thank you, Melissa and Jeremy, for taking the wine with you to Cape May, and all of you for bringing it home with you and playing along. We'll see you in a week, if not sooner, i.e. Kathy on Sunday.